What's going on, guys? Welcome back to CFP Talks. This is episode number 8, and I'm David Fuchs, former student of the guy over there, Joe Nissom, lead
Actually,
instructor.
episode 9.
Is it episode 9? Wow.
Episode
Okay.
9.
All right. Episode 9. Um, so CFP Talks episode 9.
There
David
it is.
Fuchs, Joe Nissom, subject matter expert, founder of Nissom Tutoring, gets you guys across the finish line of the CFP. And speaking of the CFP, we're right at the closing of the window. And congrats to everybody just that went through the process. I know it's
Yeah.
absolutely grueling. So congratulations on just being done with it.
Yeah, it's got to feel good. Got to feel good.
Got it. Being done with it. And then especially heading into the holidays. But a special congratulations to everyone that got through it and passed it. Congratulations. And welcome to the CFP designation club. But for those that didn't,
To the fraternity.
unfortunately, to the fraternity.
Yeah.
But for those that didn't, that unfortunately did not get through and get that passing grade, one thing that Joe and I wanted to talk about today was really getting through the finish line and, what you guys may be able to change if you guys are planning on taking it the second time around to get through that finish line.
Yeah, so I want to piggyback here. Congratulations if you passed the exam. Absolutely wonderful accomplishment. And for a lot of you guys who just took it and it hasn't sunk in yet, it is probably one of the best accomplishments of your career. So, soak it in and kind of be in the moment here and really enjoy that and savor it, because if you did pass, you probably put in a lot of time and effort. If you're a second time or a third time test taker, really savor that moment, because it's a really incredible feeling. There's nothing like putting in the work and then getting the results. So congratulations. But like David said, let's talk about if you failed. Okay, so number one, it's okay. It is, all that simply means is that you probably weren't ready to pass the test. And we said this last week on our chat. We said, look, when you fail an exam, that doesn't mean you're a failure. Actually, there's this guy that I used to watch who's like a motivational speaker. His name was Zig Ziglar, really old dude. But he would always say that failure is an event, not a person. And that always, I read like probably 4 or 5 of his books, and that is probably one of 2 lines that he would always say that really stuck with me over the years. I mean, the last time I read any of his books was 10 years ago. But just remember that just because you failed a test doesn't mean that you are a failure or there's anything wrong or holy crap, I'm an idiot, or I get it. It sucks. It feels terrible. Take a couple of days and just, let the feeling settle before you go out and do anything. But I do want to kind of talk a little bit about, what can you do differently the second time around or the third time around or whatever time around this is for you that will actually get you across the finish line.
Yeah.
First thing that I want to talk about is you need to stop measuring your progress by the number of hours that you put in and measure it by the quality or what you're actually able to perform. And David, I really want you to talk a little bit about your experience with this, because you are a guy that came in, and when we first met, you had put in a lot of hours. In fact, a lot of people in your group were coming in with, I've done 2,000 questions, or I put in 200 hours, or I studied 3 hours a night. I studied 8 hours on the weekends. I gave up my life. And it comes in with a lot of stuff. And the thing is that's all true. Like, none of that is not true. But unfortunately, the number of hours that you put in are not necessarily going to reflect a passing score, nor does it guarantee a passing score. A lot of institutions will put out guideline hours to study.
Mhm.
CFA is notorious for this, where they say 300 hours. There's even a guy who started a website called 300hours.com that's dedicated to the CFA. I think the requisite study time on CFP that they recommend is 2 or 2,
200. I actually just typed it into
right?
Google because I was going to reference it.
Right. It's
Um,
a,
I typed in how many hours to pass the CFP into Google, and the first thing that pops up, this is actually from Dalton.
mhm.
That Dalton says 200 hours.
200 hours. Okay, so Dalton
And
says 200 hours. They've been around for a while. That's probably a
that's a pretty
good
good
gauge.
number. But like you said, I think people worry too much about like, oh, and they count the hours. They're like, well, I did 10 last week and I'm gonna do about 15 this week. And then next month I think I can get probably 50 hours. So by the time the exam comes, I think I can get 215 hours out of the way, and then I should be good.
Right.
Without thinking about, oh, okay, yes, you have 250 hours, which equals however many minutes, but what did you do during those 200 hours, or during those 215 hours? That really, really matters. And that's going to help you get over the finish line.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that this is the hardest thing for anybody to wrap your mind around. The fact that you're doing something doesn't mean that it's actually benefiting you. So, and I talked about this. So last week or the week before that, we talked about the Q bank. I think
That
it
was
was
it was 2 weeks ago we
2
talked about
weeks
the
ago,
Q bank.
right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all
yeah.
right. So we talked about this 2 weeks ago. The fact of the matter is that the Q bank makes you feel like you're doing a lot, even if you're not necessarily getting a lot out of it. And there's a lot of study tools that make you feel like, okay, I'm doing something, and something is better than nothing. And this is something that I talk to students about in their assessment session. And I don't know if I did this with your group, David, but this is, I typically ask, like, how many hours did you put in, especially for
Mhm.
second time testing? How many hours did you put in studying for the exam? A lot of
The
people be like, oh my God, too much, right?
yeah.
Is like the first answer. But then I say, my second question to that is, how many of those were truly uninterrupted, focused hours? And then everybody kind of cringes a little bit because they're sitting there going, well, how many of hours was your email off? How many of those hours was your cell phone not in your hand? How many times did you look and check a text message? How many times did your phone go bzz, bzz, and you're checking Instagram?
Hmm.
And that is kind of a really, really good starting point, because I did this when I was studying for CFA, and it would, that first hour that I would sit down and study on a Saturday, I'm checking my phone, I get up, I gotta fix this, I gotta grab one cracker out of the cabinet, like, and it would take me a little while for myself to settle, but then those next couple of hours would just be like in the zone. I would
Mhm.
literally take my cell phone and stuff it in my couch so I couldn't
Yeah,
see it,
right.
and that way it was on airplane mode and I couldn't see it. And then on a break, because I didn't want it to buzz, I didn't want to hear it. I'd put on music on, really, really low, so there'd be some noise in the house. But I'm going through and I am a focused machine. And I can only do that for so long. So now, like, you came in, and this was one thing that I addressed with you was, well, what are you doing when you study? And where are you going with this? Like, again, the number of hours doesn't matter, it's the quality. Tell everybody what really changed from the first time around to the second time around that got you over the finish line, because there was a dramatic difference between where you came in and where you left.
Yeah, and I always say this, and I tell you this, and I will always kind of stick by this. I did less studying the second time around,
In terms of
but
hours.
in terms of hours, yeah, in
Okay.
terms of hours, like I wouldn't come home and or I didn't do an 8 hour Saturday ever. I ever did any more than 5 hours ever, and that was only to take a mock exam.
Hmm.
I would do 2 hours maybe during the week. I would do 3, maybe 3.5 on the weekend. I would never, and I'm talking about the second time around. The first time around, I was binging it. I was up till midnight. I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was doing 7, 8 hours on the Saturday. But the second time around, phone off, TV off, complete silence, to an extent. I wasn't in like an insane asylum, but in the zone, in the zone,
Yeah.
really going in with a plan, as opposed to I'll crack open a book and maybe I'll read this chapter because I'm struggling with it a little bit. And then I'll take like 20 questions on it and see how many I get right.
Mm.
Going in with a plan of how I wanted to structure those 2 hours. So again, going back to what you said, a lot of it was, going through the curriculum and having more of a structure, but it was not the time that I put in I couldn't even, honestly, I couldn't tell you how many hours I put in the second time because I didn't count. The first time I did, I was like, oh, okay. So I had it on a calendar and I wrote this many hours this day, and I had it listed all throughout like a 3 month. And I'm like, this is how I'm going to get to 220 hours or whatever it was. The second time around, I didn't even actually keep track of how many hours I studied. I still don't even know, but I do know that I was a lot more structured, and my time that I did study was a hell of a lot more valuable and quality than it was the first time around.
So walk me back through when you failed the test. Did
I don't
you
want to go
feel
back there, but
okay?
okay, for
No,
you, I will.
well, thank you. I mean, you're a kind man. Were you like, we talked about this and I'm pretty sure it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Like, I remember you
Mhm.
saying you were pretty angry. Like, remember we were talking about it was like going through the stages of grief.
Yeah.
But did you feel like you deserved to pass that first time around?
When I went into the exam, yes. When I, about 30 questions in, and when I finally went to hit submit, no, I did not think I didn't think I was going to.
Yeah.
I actually remember specifically texting my girlfriend at the time. At the halfway point, I went to my car and I said, I'm not passing this exam. I was only 85 questions in. I said, I'm not passing. I
Mm.
knew I wasn't going to. And when I finally left the exam that day, I realized that I was like, you know what? I wasn't ready to pass. And like you always say, if you don't pass, it's not because you didn't know what a crat versus a crut was or anything like that. Yes, that goes into it, but you're just simply not ready to pass the exam. And
That's
if you're
right.
not ready to pass the exam, you're not going to pass it.
That's right. And you need a certain comfort with it. And I'll tell you this, if you're here and you're saying, what do I do this second time around? Well, one, the first thing that I would change is your attitude. The CFP doesn't owe you anything. And it's kind of one of the things that I love about CFP or CFA and a lot of these designation exams. Because unlike an MBA, I can go and get an MBA and you pay 60 G's or 90
Yeah.
G's or 100 G's. And if you really want to do it and you go to Wharton and you pay 200 grand, they ain't failing you.
Right.
The CFP doesn't lie. The CFP is completely objective. And it's one of the beautiful parts of the exam is that the exam doesn't lie.
Mhm.
You either knew the material or you didn't. And so the CFP doesn't owe you anything. Your 200 hours, your 250, your 270, your 300, it does not matter to the CFP. The CFP doesn't care that you put in 200 hours. Nobody, that is really only relevant to you. Okay, so the first thing I'm telling you is you got to change that attitude that the CFP doesn't owe you anything for the hours that you study. And then second, I suggest that you really take an honest look at how you were studying. Because if you take a look at how you were studying, I guarantee there's 3 or 4 changes that are common sense that you can make right off the bat. Like we said, there is the number of hours that you put in doesn't matter. What matters is that you're able to have enough comfort with a section that you can break down questions, understand what the question is asking, and then actually turn that into a right answer. because the biggest mistake that people walk in going is, I'm familiar with a topic. David, you know this. I said this 100 times. I said, being familiar they will churn you out
Yeah.
during the exam, because being familiar with a topic that's where they put two answers that are close enough to each other that you have no idea what to do with it.
And
You need to get comfortable enough where you can get through the wording on this question sucks.
Mhm.
Of course the wording is going to suck. That's why it's a question. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to make you think and interpret. So the idea here is that this is an exam of fundamentals and this is an exam of discipline. You have to know your fundamentals, you have to know your definitions, and you have to be disciplined enough that understanding that going through something one time or two times or being familiar is an arrogant study plan. And I don't mean that to be insulting by any means, but I know I went into CFA level 3 the first time with that. I thought I deserved to pass. I busted my ass. I killed level 1. I killed level 2. I did it during COVID. I had to travel in order to do it. I paid extra money. I paid for a hotel. All of this for an exam while I'm building a business. Woe is me. And I was pissy and I was grouchy and I was upset. And I thought that I deserved it. And then I said to myself, oh, I need to look at these study plans and I need to make sure that I'm actually putting myself in a position to succeed. My study plan was undisciplined. And because it was undisciplined, I got an undisciplined result.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm telling you guys. If your study plan is not disciplined, okay, this has nothing to do with academics. If your study plan is not disciplined, meaning you get at least a minimum of 3 looks at the material. And I'm not talking about 3 looks at one topic. I'm talking about 3 looks at every topic. You need to see it once. You need to leave it alone. You need to come back to it again and drill it over and over again, because every time you do, you're going to pick up on nuance,
Mhm.
on subtlety, on certain things that you didn't know. There are times where I remember when I was learning like the taxation of Roth, it was like I had to go back and reread those rules and look at that chart. Like it felt like 20 times. It's probably 5, but it
Yeah.
felt like 20. Like I can't believe I'm looking at this chart again. And the point is that I had to keep going through that repetition over and over and
Oh, yeah.
over again. And then it just stuck and it was there. And that's not by accident. That's on purpose. That's by design. That's the
Mhm.
way our brains work. We need to see something over and over again. So, from that standpoint, it is indicative that you go in and you do the repetition, because it's like anything else in life, right? We get good at our jobs not because we show up to work on Monday and take the rest of the week off. We get good at our jobs because we do it 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. You're gonna get good at your job because not because you saw one client scenario, right? You start to feel comfortable with investments and retirement stuff, because how many by client number 20, you're going, now this stuff is starting to
Yeah.
repeat itself.
Yeah. It's all repetition.
All
Athletes say it.
repetition.
Athletes say it all the time.
Yeah.
What did you do to get, to play at basketball at Kentucky, or, get, whatever into, play in the NFL or whatever. A lot of athletes, one thing that I see all the time is just repetition, 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 shooting 1,000 free throws,
Right.
throwing 1,000, footballs into the net, like whatever it is. It's all a repetition. It's the same thing. And it's not about, oh, well, I spent 50 hours reading about the estate and how to structure, a dynasty trust or whatever. It's, you could spend 50 hours, but if those 50 hours you're not concentrating and you're not, doing it in a way that is productive, you could spend 1,000 hours. It doesn't
100%.
matter.
Yeah.
That's the thing that if you ask me what my like number one tip would be to someone that's coming into the exam or taking it a second time, it would be, don't go by, oh, well, the CFP board or Dalton or Kaplan, they say, you should do about 200 hours, and typically someone will pass if they do 200 hours. I wouldn't even look at that.
Mm,
It's a decent guideline, I guess. Like, yeah, you're probably going to end up doing about 200 hours if you're doing it the right way anyway,
mm.
but don't use it as a benchmark and say, okay, well, I did 200 hours and, I should be good now, because you may be good, but you also may not be.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to leave everybody with two nuggets of wisdom. Okay. One concentrated hour is better than 5 mediocre hours. Okay. So if
Sure.
you're the person that goes, oh, I can only get an hour in today. Screw it. It's not even worth it. I'll save it to the weekend when I can actually sit down and get into the material.
For 4 hours.
One concentrated hour is better than 5 hours. Okay. And remember, you have about a 3 hour limit every day. Especially working, it's 2 to 3 hours, depending on your concentration.
Mhm.
Okay. The second thing is, wait, I had that second thing in my brain. I think I forgot it.
Oh no.
What was
Oh
it?
no. We're gonna have to go back and re-record this entire thing now.
I hope not. But I'll tell you the hold on. No, I have it. I had it.
First thing is 1 hour is better than 5.
1 hour is better than 5. Oh, and I guess we're gonna have to leave it at that because I can't remember it now. It was good too. God.
Is it anything about the Q bank?
No, it's not about the Q bag. No, I can't remember what I had, but that's actually it's a great place to leave off.
Yeah.
1 hour, one concentrated good hour is better than 5. Okay.
Yeah.
And good practice is necessary. It's not just practice, it's good practice. It's not clicking on the Q bang and going, oh, let me just read this and I'm gonna rewrite this 100 times. Does shit. You gotta focus and you have to apply it, and you have to take away all your crutches and shortcuts. If that's the way you're going in, studying with crutches and shortcuts and all those types of things, you're not studying. You're trying to pass a test. And the surest way to fail an exam is by working through shortcuts and tips and tricks. Those things are great, but they're great when you already have your foundation.
Mhm.
You have a foundation, then you can worry about shortcuts. I have probably 20, 30 calculator shortcuts that I can show you, but I'm not going to show it to you until you actually understand how to use the calculator the long way. Right? We don't teach children how to multiply until they learn how to add, for a good reason. You need to learn how to add first before you multiply, because multiplying won't make sense. The shortcuts don't work unless you understand the foundations. I remembered my second thing.
I knew it was gonna come back to you.
Treat your prep like you were doing it for your kid. If you wouldn't let your kid get away with it, don't let yourself get away with it.
That's a good one.
Okay? Treat your prep like you would with your kid. If you're taking your kid to tutoring and they came back with homework, you wouldn't let them get away with it. I know you wouldn't. So treat it like you would your kid, because we always do better for our kids than we do for ourselves.
Yeah. Oh.
You got anything? You got any other
No,
nuggets?
no. I just think the hour thing. Yeah, I just it's annoying. It's honestly kind of a little frustrating when I hear people say, and it could be for any exam, the CFA, the CFP, whatever, and they say, yeah, I put in, the 225 hours, like, and I'm not going to sit there and like burst anyone's bubble or anything, but and I don't know, maybe they put in 220 very quality hours, like I don't know, but it's that people focus on the hours too much,
Yes.
and that's the number one thing. Like I said a few minutes ago, don't worry about how many hours you hit. You're gonna, if you do the right study program and you do go about the right process, you'll eventually hit the necessary hours,
Mm,
but you'll do it in a much more productive way than just trying to race to a certain number,
I
a
agree.
certain time limit.
I agree. All right, great stuff, man. Well, great episode.
Cool.
And if
Good.
you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to David. Feel free to reach out to myself. You guys can catch us on LinkedIn. You can email us, whatever is easiest. And keep your head up and keep going if you failed. And if you passed, again, congratulations. And
Yeah,
welcome to the CFP fraternity.
absolutely. Big accomplishment.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
Take care.